So how are you all doing?
Okay.
Good. Surviving or thriving? Are we surviving or thriving during the lockdown?
Both.
Yeah. Okay, so Nico, did you sort of already organize everything? Did you put me out? Did you add me as a host?
Yeah, of course, but bear with me for a second. I'm trying to actually, well, organize live Facebook session, but not as me, but as Hove StressBusters, which is a bit odd now.
So try and do that. Just to say, so I'll do a proper introduction for those of you who have never attended any Hove StressBusters events before, online or offline. I'll do a short introduction soon. But just to say, so this is our second online event, and the first one had some teething problems. I personally, well, a few of you were there. I personally wasn't happy that because it wasn't as interactive as usual. So I think we've sorted out the teething problems. So when the speakers are giving their talks, we will, the host, myself and Nico, will mute everyone. But if you want to interrupt, because our events are always about discussion, aren't they? So if at any point you want to interrupt or ask a question, or if a speaker asks a question and you want to say something, you can unmute yourself by pressing the space bar. Okay, so that's very important because last time I don't think, well, I certainly didn't know that, and many people didn't do it, so it was a bit stilted. We were all waiting for the host to unmute us. So if at any point you want to add something, ask something, just press the space bar. Is that okay with the speakers?
So just to be clear, when the speaker is speaking, we don't wait for them to sort of do their talk and then have questions afterwards. We can just...
Yes, because that's what we did last time, and that's not really how our sort of real events, our real events, proper offline events are very, very interactive. So it didn't, I don't know, Julie and Nikki, you were there last time. How did you feel?
I wasn't there, but I listened to the recording, some of it, and I think because it was like that last time, I thought it was going to be like that this time. So I kind of written a sort of stream of consciousness. So it might work better for me to have questions at the end, but if it's not clear, then I'd love people to ask.
Yeah, because you've always, I mean, you've given quite a few StressBusters talks, Julie, and you always, I think it's all about getting prepared, but you are quite flexible, aren't you? I think you have always been.
Yeah, this talk is a bit different from some of the other talks that I've done. It's trying to turn into a book.
Okay,
That's
right.
kind of like, I'm trying to kind of...
Okay, right. So for your talk, we'll just wait for you to invite questions, okay? Right. And you, Debbie, what do you think?
Should we just run with it and see? Let's just run with it. And I think the other option is that if people want to put their questions in the chat bar, then I can address them maybe when they're appropriate, because the answer might be addressed later.
Yes, and we will also have people on Facebook Live if Nico manages to set it up. So last time I was monitoring Facebook Live and I was sort of feeding the questions to the group, to the speaker.
I think the main thing is what you said the other night is that if everybody is muted, and then the worst thing that was happening before was that every time somebody coughed, or they would come onto the screen, like it's happening now, isn't it? So
yeah, that's why everyone is muted. That's why everyone is muted by default.
That's why. So it works really well if you mute everybody, and then it's only when somebody specifically wants to speak that they press the space bar.
Yeah, so that they have to
work really well.
Yes, yeah. Yes. I think it's that's why everyone is muted, to avoid this sort of thing where everybody coughs and rustles. But I think there were a few situations where I noticed some people wanted to say something and they were like, like bursting.
The space bar does that really well, doesn't it? Yeah. Yes. Unless Julie would prefer not for people not to do that, which is fair enough?
Yeah, well, it's kind of have to see how it goes. But I feel like I've got quite a lot to say, and I quite like not to have to leave out the stuff at the end. That's really what I'd like. So
Okay.
From that point of view, it makes sense to have the questions after.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Right, so we better crack on. So I'm attaching the program for the event. So you should be able to find it in the chat box shortly. Okay, so well, first of all, Nico, are we ready to go? Facebook?
Go.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let me welcome all the new people as well and tell you a few words about StressBusters program. So Hove StressBusters is a community wellbeing program which has been running in Brighton Hove for over 8 years now. I am Jelena and I'm the program director. Now, I'm the only person in the group who's not a practitioner of any kind. I'm an experimental psychologist. So I've done years doing research, lecturing, and so on. But everybody else in the group is a practitioner, some kind of well-being practitioner or therapist. So we all got together about over 8 years ago, back in 2011, realizing that there are so many different approaches, well-being approaches out there. And some were kind of mainstream or close to mainstream, and some that were so way out there in terms of how alternative and non-scientific they were, and scientists would cringe to them. And yet, all these things are helping some people. Okay, so every single therapy or approach can help someone. Now, obviously, you won't know if something can help you unless you tried yourself firsthand. But because there are so many, there's literally hundreds of well-being approaches, unless you have all the time and the money in the world to go from therapist to therapist, from class to class, unless you do that, you won't really be able to, you might be missing out on something very valuable. And sometimes even the word of mouth is not enough because for example, your friend might swear by craniosacral therapy, for instance. Oh. Why were you muting me? Right. Right, sorry. This is a technical issue I haven't sorted out. Decline. Okay, so where are you? So yes, like I said, your friend might be swearing by craniosacral therapy, and you have seen how it helped them, and yet you tried and you think, oh my God, this is rubbish. But does that mean that craniosacral therapy is rubbish as a whole, or maybe it's just not the thing for you? And likewise, something else might be working for you, which might not work for your friend. And even research, and I'm a psychologist, I'm a researcher, even research doesn't help there because it doesn't have a predictive power. So what research does, it tells you if something is significantly more effective than the placebo treatment. But usually every effective treatment, including powerful drug treatments, they work in about 2/3 of people who try them. And what about that 1/3 who don't respond to that particular treatment? So how do you know? I can't tell you, or nobody can tell you with any level of certainty, like, yes, you should definitely try this. This is going to work for you. Okay, you have to try it. And basically, that's the idea behind the Hove StressBusters program. And that's how we came together 8 years ago. And why we're here tonight, it's because we want to provide a platform where people can gain first-hand experience of a wide variety of well-being approaches in order to discover the specific techniques or maybe specific tools or tips that can work for them to improve their own physical and psychological well-being. So every month we have a talk and demonstration evening like this one, where we have 2 different approaches. And as a program director, I actually choose those approaches to be as different from each other as possible. So tonight we're having Ayurveda and stress release exercise, seemingly totally disconnected approaches, although it won't surprise me if we find some overlap there, as is usually the case. And the reason why we choose such different approaches is because very often people attend an event because they're interested in only one approach. The other approach maybe they either never heard of before, or maybe they have heard of it, but they really aren't that interested. So they wouldn't really go out of their way to attend an event where they can discover that approach. And yet, very often, it's that other approach that they didn't come to see that blows them away. Okay, so this is what we've been doing for over 8 years, and this is what we're now starting to do with our online events. So like I said, this is the second one. I don't know who's here tonight, but last month I know that we were joined by some people who have been following our program online for a number of years, but who aren't local to Brighton and Hove and who therefore couldn't attend. So is there anyone here tonight who's not from Brighton Hove area? Yes, where are you from? Oh, I can't hear you. Did you say?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Newcastle upon Tyne.
Oh, right. So you're in Newcastle. Great.
Yeah.
And we have a lady, Ali. Oh, sorry. Where are you from, Ali?
Portsmouth.
Ah, great. And anyone else? No. Okay, so everyone's local. Yes, so last month I think we had somebody who wasn't even from England. Oh, Christina. Let's unmute Christina.
Hello.
Hi.
I am not from England. I'm from Vienna, but I used to live in England, so.
Ah, great. Okay, well, it's lovely that you have all joined us, and this is what's fantastic about these online events. I'm actually thinking that once this lockdown is over, that we might continue doing this online, because we're really reaching out to a wider audience, and that's really the point of our program. Where was I? Okay, so without further ado, I could be talking on and on. I'm very excited about the online events. We're also on Facebook Live, so if anyone's watching, feel free to add your comments there. I will be monitoring the thread and feeding your questions back to the group. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker this evening. Like I said, there is the Hove StressBusters, so there is the event program in the chat box, and I will also upload it on Facebook. So you can see there that our first speaker is Julie Ulbricht. Julie is an Ayurvedic practitioner. She's also an Amnanda therapist and trainer. Amnanda is a specific massage and trauma healing technique, which is related, is it stemming from Ayurveda?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's also a family constellations and feeding your demons facilitator. So she's really a sort of like a systemic healer, and, you know, actually a very, very experienced and qualified Ayurvedic practitioner. So she's going to talk about something very radical tonight.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hi. So I'd like to just begin with a pause. It helps me to connect.
Oh.
Yep, okay.
And it's lovely to see so many faces. So hello to everybody else that's out there on the web. So I'd like you to become present to whatever challenges have come into your life recently, with the pandemic, with the lockdown. So those may be different things for different people. Maybe to do with job, to do with money, to do with a loss of routine, a loss of freedom to travel or to visit our loved ones. You may have had worry about people that you know or even about yourself. So just bringing all that into our awareness. And just acknowledge the impact that that has had on you. And now I'd like to invite you to become present to any strategies that you notice in yourself. So behaviors that come up in the face of these kind of challenges. So all these losses will emphasize our addictive behaviors, the ways that we use to cope when we feel overwhelmed. And it's not surprising if you've had moments of feeling overwhelmed. There's been a lot changing, a lot that's unknown, a lot that's surprising. And I'm going to share my screen with you and show you the way that my family copes or has been coping with the pandemic. Whoops. I've got it on the wrong setting. So I think you can see my screen, and somehow I've lost. Right. So it's going to have to stay like that.
Setting.
What?
I think if you go to the slideshow setting in the menu.
Yes, I can't reach it because it's underneath the Zoom.
Okay. It's all right like this. It's all right. You can move the Zoom window. There it is.
Right. Okay. Is that better? So this is the way my family's been coping with the pandemic. And obsession with food is one of the things that led me into Ayurveda. And now at least I can have a healthy obsession with food, or an obsession with healthy food. So we all have strategies. And I just invite you to be gentle with yourself when you notice these strategies for coping. And the alternative to these kinds of behaviors is to actually really nourish ourselves. So in a consumer society, self-care, the nourishment that we get from self-care is radical. And that's because if I nourish myself from the inside with diet, with routines that support me, with meditation, with all these practices which don't cost money, don't involve buying things, then I no longer need to be a consumer. I no longer need to feel the empty feeling inside with food or shopping or alcohol or binge watching or social media or whatever the form of addiction is my habitual escape route from just being present and feeling what I'm feeling. So we have these escape routes for a reason, and I don't want to make any of us wrong for having those strategies, which evolved when we were very young. But what's useful is to look at them and to look at alternatives and see if we can come into a different relationship with them. So that's the message of this talk. And that's the reason why in this day and age, the message of Ayurveda is radical. So what drew me initially to Ayurveda and then later to family constellations is that I felt very disconnected inside. And disconnection, both disconnection from my heart and disconnection from my purpose in life. And disconnection is something that I'm going to be talking about tonight, because it's really at the heart of what is not functional in our society. And as individuals, we're part of society and we're very affected by what's happening outside. In the first part of the talk, I'm going to be using the metaphor of the Kali Yuga, and I'm also going to be drawing on my constellations background to look at what's happening in the wider world. What are the enormous changes which are taking place at the moment, and what is breaking down and what is emerging. So I'm just going to briefly say something about family constellations. It's called a systemic approach because we look at things as systems. So rather than looking at the individual and saying, oh, this person's got a problem, let's give them this therapy, let's sort them out, we look at that person within their family, because they're not operating in isolation, and what's happening to them isn't happening in isolation. So the family includes the living members, but it also includes the ancestors. So those who maybe, even if we haven't met them, have an influence on our lives. And I'll just give an example of that. Somebody that I'm working with at the moment who came with symptoms of anxiety. When I spoke to her, I asked about her mother, and she said, oh, my mother's a schizophrenic. Well, if your mother's schizophrenic, it's not surprising that you're going to be anxious, because imagine growing up with a mother who's a schizophrenic. But then if you look at the mother, why is the mother a schizophrenic? And so it kind of goes back, you know, what happened to the mother or the mother's mother? So these traumatic events impact individuals, and then their behavior impacts, and it gets passed down the generations. So in that sense, we're not separate, we're part of these systems. And you can't really just treat one person without looking at the bigger system, because you're missing information. And the individual is also part of society. And there are social traumas like war, you know, or slavery, these kind of big events that impacted generations. And individually, we're affected by those big social events, but we're also individually, we are affecting and having an impact on society ourselves. And we have a creative potential to have an impact and to change things. And these very small changes which individuals make, if you think of something like, you know, Rosa Parks refusing to sit down on a bus in South Africa, and then, you know, these kind of mounting little small events and small impacts made by individuals, and then something that looked very fixed and permanent, like apartheid, you know, one day that begins to tip over and crumble. And at the moment, there are a lot of things that are beginning to crumble. If you look at our institutions, if you look at, you know, accusations of abuse that have been in the media a lot, so the church, you know, corruption, those kind of things. So things are breaking down, and out of that, there's the potential for something healthier. So just to give me an idea, could you put up your hand if you're completely new to Ayurveda? Okay, great. Well, welcome. Ayurveda is an enormous subject, and I'm sort of focusing on what I think is particularly relevant right now. So there's quite a lot of things that I won't cover, but yeah, I hope you'll find it interesting. And I'm not going to be using a lot of technical terms, but I will explain what Ayurveda means. So it's made up of two words. Ayush means life, and Veda means science. So it's the science of life, or how to live well. And Ayurvedic texts date back 2,000 years. But in fact, Ayurveda is much older than that. It's over 5,000 years old, because it was, before that, was an oral tradition that was passed down by memorizing these amazing sutras, which are like poetry and contain all this wisdom. And in my experience, the principles of Ayurveda are very relevant and very applicable even now. And they've been practiced for a long time. So there's clearly something that works. So we use diet, we use lifestyle advice, which is kind of more what I'm going to focus on today. And we use herbs and treatments, and all of those to bring balance into our lives. And either, if we're already ill, to get us back into balance, and then to keep us in balance, so that it's like a preventative medicine. So what I'm talking about today is kind of drawing on these two strands, the systemic approach from family constellations and Ayurveda, which I've been practicing for over 10 years. And in a moment, I'm going to begin with an experiential exercise, which includes a visualization. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the situation in society as a whole. and why Ayurveda is helpful right now. And I'm also going to talk a bit about specific practical steps. And I'll give a few pointers at the end of the talk. Because there's kind of quite a lot of material, because Ayurveda is very, very comprehensive. And I realized when I was planning this talk that actually it would be useful to have another session. So what I've decided to do is have another free talk to kind of go into a bit more detail as a sort of follow-up. And possibly have a bit more time for interaction as well. And so for tonight, I'm going to focus a bit more on why Ayurveda is helpful. And one of the reasons for that is, in my experience, if I'm not convinced about the benefits of something, I'm not going to do it. So I might learn 10 different meditation techniques, but if I'm not convinced about them, I'm not going to do them on a regular basis. It takes quite a lot for us to adopt these practices. And they are incredibly beneficial if we find the thing that works for us. So I'm going to be talking about the why. That's really what I'm going to focus on. And the other thing to say about that is the actual practices that Ayurveda recommends. You can read about those in books or, you know, on the internet, their blogs and stuff. And again, you tend to focus on this is what you need to do without really going into why you need to do it. So that's really what I want to share with you tonight is why is this helpful? Why is this relevant exactly now? So I invite you to allow yourself to focus. We're going to go into the experiential exercise. You might want to turn off the phone or anything that's distracting you and get comfortable. Because there's going to be an opportunity to connect with yourself. And I'm also going to be talking as we go through this. And really giving you an overview of what we are experiencing as a collective. So the whole of society and the whole of the world is in some degree of lockdown. And this is producing a particular kind of experience for us. So I'd like you to start by visualizing in front of you what is unknown in your life. So there may be a number of things that looked as though they were fairly stable, like maybe your work, maybe your finances, your ability to plan your life, that are now somewhat in question, somewhat unknown. So just being present to these unknown elements, and they may be around health, your health or other people's health, risk. And how is it to be with what is unknown? Just to really be with it for a moment. we're in a situation which is emerging, where information on a daily basis is changing, and often we don't know what to trust. Some of the information may conflict with other things that we hear. What do we trust? What's real? What is really the risks? What's going to happen? So in this situation, we have less control. And maybe that's an illusion. Maybe we never really had that control before, but we certainly have the impression of less control. And that may make us feel helpless and rather young. It may trigger memories of probably unconsciously situations where we felt helpless, where we felt that adults were in control and we didn't have any control, and maybe situations where there was no way out. And this aspect of inescapability is very linked with trauma. And so often feelings can come up which go back to early traumatic experiences that we had when we were small, which whether or not we consciously remember them. And then in response, there can be feelings of terror and panic and overwhelm. And sometimes overwhelm is experienced as a kind of numbness or freeze or dissociation, because it's just too much, you know. And in this state of fear, we are very impressionable, we are easily led, and we are easily manipulated. So if you look at society as a whole, a society in fear is very easily manipulated. And of course, we can see that kind of thing happening. And probably feel that there's not very much we can do about it, but in fact there is. And that's really what I want to focus on, is what the alternative to that is, and how we can increase our resilience and our inner resource. So we start, as always, by connecting to the body. Coming home to our body. And when we're in our body, we're in the present moment. And a lot of the fears are about what would happen if, or what would happen when, or so they're not actually in the present. And when we're in the present, some of those will just be released just by coming into that connection and beginning to ground ourselves. And the other thing that we can do, as well as connecting to the body, is we can connect to our ancestors. So the people in our family line who are no longer with us, they all survived long enough to pass on life. So they are survivors. They were the ones who survived. And they are our inheritance. The life that we have came through them. So there is a resource there. And some of them may have lived through very challenging times. And we can connect to that resource and begin to see the fear response in ourselves as something that's separate. It's not us. So yes, yes, I get triggered, but actually there's part of me that can still feel my feet on the ground. And we can begin to differentiate what's happening into 3 areas, or what we're experiencing into 3 areas. So the first of those areas is the things that we really can't control. Like right now, I'm not allowed to travel more than to the shops. So there's no point me complaining about that or getting upset about that. And I'm sure that most of you either have come to terms with a lot of things or are in progress of coming to terms with a lot of things over which you don't have control. So then there is the second category, which is all the things that I don't know. Am I going to get ill? Are my loved ones going to get ill? You know, questions about jobs and money and when's it all going to end? And again, those are out of our hands, and I think it's helpful to recognize that there are a lot of things in life that we don't know, that ordinarily we take for granted, like, I don't know when I'm going to die. It's very much up and it's sort of present and we're looking at it, but the unknown is part of life. And then the third area is where we can make choices and we can take some control, and that's what I want to focus on more. So the areas where you have choice in your life. And the routines create the structure and create inner resource and resilience. So we'll be looking specifically at routines. But for now, I'd just like you to close your eyes and connect with your body. And connect through your body with your inner wisdom, with the quiet voice that's maybe your gut knowing. And because this voice is quiet, often we don't hear what it's saying. But if we begin to make space for it in our lives, then it can begin to be heard, and we can begin to use that wisdom to make choices which will work better for us. So I'd like you to connect with your body. With the part of you that can listen and open your awareness. And into that opening, allow the possibility that your ancestors are with you. That your guides are with you, that there's something greater than us, what we might call source or God or the greater mystery, something that's much vaster, of which we're just a very small part. And as we begin to open to that, we can feel or begin to feel maybe that we're not alone, that we're not on our own. that we can be guided, that we can be supported, and that we can be nourished. So just, if you can, allow some of that nourishment into your body. And then gradually, when you're ready, beginning to open your eyes and come back into the group. So the subtitle for this talk is how to orient yourself in the time of the Kali Yuga. What I see in the world is a very disorienting force, a lack of leadership. And we can call this time Kali Yuga. We can talk about fear-mongering, about manipulation, conspiracy theories, whatever. I think that I expect that we all recognize that there's something quite destructive in the way that we've been living as a society, and it manifests in the form of a kind of rampant consumerism and a plundering of the earth's resources with no thought for tomorrow. And in the face of this destructive force, we need to find our own orientation. And we can find our own orientation. And I'm going to get another slide. Right. Apologies for the spelling mistake. This is Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. You've probably heard of him. And this is a quote from him. So Sangha is the name for community, the Buddhist community. And I was sort of fascinated by this idea that the next Buddha might not be an individual, but might be a lot of people, a community that together is waking up. So I find that a very inspiring thought. And this is the goddess Kali. Kali is known as the goddess of death, and she's always depicted with this necklace of skulls around her neck. She brings not physical death, but the death of the ego, the death of this idea that we're separate, which is an illusion. So the death that Kali brings is actually a liberation, and she's seen as compassionate. So we kind of haven't really got that in the West, I think. We haven't really understood that. So Kali Yuga means the age of Kali. And I'm just going to read a short extract from a book called Journeys in the Kali Yuga by Aki Cederberg. The Indian tradition describes 4 ages or yugas in which the cosmos itself is created and destroyed in an endless cycle, beginning with the Golden Age and ending in a final Iron Age. This Iron Age is our age, the age of ignorance, known as the Kali Yuga. It is characterized by the loss of spiritual life and traditions and the valuing of everything through materialism and money. In this final cycle, there is an escalation of degradation and conflict, culminating in cataclysmic events such as earthquakes and the spread of diseases. Does it sound familiar? So, and it's called the Age of Ignorance because from the Vedic point of view, we've lost contact with reality and we've lost contact with our spiritual traditions. So we're ignorant in that sense. And this is just showing you the yugas, and the main reason for having this slide is to show you how long they are. So 2,700 years. And I've got a disclaimer, I'm not an expert on the Kali Yuga or on Vedic philosophy. And there are a lot of different opinions about when the Kali Yuga ends. So some people think it's already ended. Some people think it's imminently about to end. Personally, as I said, I'm not an expert, but my feeling is that maybe we're in the transition period because we're told in the scriptures that during the transition period, there are lots of these environmental upheavals, cataclysmic events, earthquakes, and so on. And we've been seeing a lot of those recently. But for me, what's really interesting about this is what's your experience, what's my experience of these energy shifts? Because personally, for me, in the last 3 to 4 years, it feels like something has really changed. And I'd be interested to know whether other people experience that also. So one reason that I find the Kali Yuga a useful metaphor is because it helps me to orient myself. It helps me to know that some of the things that are happening in the world are not normal, are not inevitable, and will not go on forever. And I'm just going to list the main characteristics of the Kali Yuga, just to give you an idea. So many fake ideologies will spread throughout the world. People will believe things easily. They will be easily led. Those with power will dominate the poor. Rulers will become unreasonable. Their taxes will not be fair. Rulers will become a danger to the world. People will start migrating, seeking countries where people eat wheat. Religion, truthfulness, cleanliness, tolerance, mercy, physical strength, and memory will all diminish with each passing day. Greed and anger will be common. People will have thoughts of murder with no justification and will see nothing wrong in that. People will no longer get married and live with each other just for sexual pleasure. Sexual intercourse will be seen as the central requirement of life. People will become addicted to intoxicating drinks and drugs. People will declare themselves as gurus and make spirituality a business. Weather and the environment will degrade with time, and frequent and unpredictable rainfalls will happen. Earthquakes will be common. Many diseases will spread. And lastly, it is foretold that Kali Yuga will be full of extreme hardships for people with ideals and values. Does any of that sound familiar? So I'm going to show you the last slide. So this is where I get on to something a bit more cheerful and constructive. So you can see in the column on the right, a lot of the things that I've been talking about: inertia, fear, disconnection. How when there's fear, we're easily influenced by the media. And when we're disconnected from nature, then there is plundering and looting of nature. The idea that as an individual, I'm an island. And down at the bottom, the kind of symptoms of addiction and consumerism that we're seeing kind of manifest. So in the face of disorientation, we can orient ourselves, we can increase resilience and love and connection. And it's really the central point is connection, because if I connect to myself, then I begin to have my own inner compass, my inner guru. And I'm not led by fear and led by these influences from the media. If I connect to nature, I realize that we're not separate and there's a resource in that. And obviously we care for something that we're connected to. And as I connect to others, I begin to find and be able to give support and to build community. And so embodiment is the way that we connect to ourselves. And there's so many therapies that can help us with this. And as we connect to the body, then we will come into contact with shadows, the things that take us away from connection, and we'll begin to face those shadows so that they're not running our behavior and causing problems in our relationships. And as we become more resourced, then rather than seeing difficulty and obstacles, we see opportunity and possibility. And lastly, in the face of chaos, we're able to create our own structure, and using routine, create good habits, because we are creatures of habit, so we may as well create good ones. And the routine provides containment and safety. And for that is needed a certain amount of discipline. So yeah, just to sum that up is if I'm present in my body, I will make contact with my inner knowing, my inner wisdom, with the voice that's present in us, in all of us, if we listen, if we give it space. And that voice will act as a compass to guide me and to guide the life choices that I make. And if I make good choices, I have a good life. So routine can be one of two things. The routine can be something that's imposed, like you should do this because it's good for you. And if you don't do this, you know, bad things will happen, or you won't get the good things, or, you know, we can kind of relate to routine in quite a negative way, like, oh, I should get more exercise. It's not very motivating, that kind of, you know, stick approach. So I'd like you to think about routine as an expression of your love for yourself. So not because we should, and not because somebody's telling us. The difference between taking exercise because I love my body and my body loves to move. And there's certain kinds of movement that are enjoyable. And on the other hand, taking exercise because I'm trying to conform to a sort of body image that's in the media, or I feel inadequate with the body that I've got at the moment and I need to fix something about it. So it's a very different intention and motivation. So I'm just going to say a few things about routine, and then there will be some time for questions. So number one thing is having some kind of routine is beneficial and grounding. So for different people, different things are going to work, but routine is useful. And our bodies our bodies have a rhythm, a circadian rhythm. So it's useful for us to align our body with the sun's clock. So getting up and going to bed at regular times is very useful for the body. And not every time is the best time for the body, because different things happen metabolically at different times of day. So from that point of view, the best time to go to bed as a kind of guide, like it is slightly different depending on types, but the best time is around 10. And then 7 or 8 hours later is the best time to get up. That's probably earlier than you get up at the moment. One of the reasons why it's recommended to get up early is because there is a different quality that's present that allows your mind to be more clear. And going to bed at 10 is your best chance at getting a good night's sleep in terms of your metabolism. Obviously, there might be factors affecting that, you know, from time to time, but that's a kind of general guideline. But it's important that it's realistic for you and your circumstances, your work, whatever commitments you have. So, yeah. So the second thing that I'd like to suggest is finding time at the beginning of the day to connect to yourself and to your guides, your ancestors, and to the greater mystery. So connecting to something that's beyond us, that's bigger than us, and to this unseen world which is in support of us. And that can really give us a very different perspective, especially doing that first thing in the morning. It's life-changing. It doesn't have to be for a long time. And find some, and when I say connect, that might be having a quiet cup of tea. It might be sitting in nature. It might be meditating. When you're trying to engage with a routine from the impulse of love, you really have to kind of find what works, because we're not imposing something. So it's like, what makes my heart sing? And finding some movement that you love and that's nourishing for you, whether that's dancing or yoga or walking outside or some kind of, I don't know if you can do sports anymore. And having said that, as I said, it will vary from individual to individual. So it may be for one particular individual that the most beneficial thing to do is to kind of give themselves an oil massage because they've got very dry skin and that's very grounding. Those are my kind of general guidelines, is to have some routine, to connect to yourself and to move every day. As I said, I would like to spend more time looking at this. If people are interested, I'm happy to do another talk in a couple of weeks. And if you put your email on the chat, then I'll let you know when that's going to be. And I think you should be able to send me a chat privately rather than to everyone. And just to finish, I'd like to suggest that you just pause for a moment and identify one thing, one small step that you can make, no matter how small. Something that you can make an intention that realistically you can commit to. So it might be just to read about something or to think about something or to adopt a small practice into your daily routine. Okay, thank you, everybody. You've listened very quietly and patiently, and I was
parents trying to take over the meeting. This is a biggie. If your kids feel like the family meeting is just a ploy to advance your agenda, trust me, they're not going to be interested.
Right. Okay, so I unmuted all the participants, but there is some background noise somewhere. So I'll keep everyone on mute. So if anyone wants to comment or has any question for Julie, you can unmute yourself. You can just click on the window, like on your little screen where is your picture, and you can unmute yourself. So, yeah.
Hi, Julie. I saw Martin somewhere as well. Hi, Martin.
Hi.
It's not really a question. It's more of a just sharing that it's just come at such an incredible time, your talk, because literally I just came to the decision to commit to a sort of Ayurvedic like daily routine, and I started yesterday. and that was without speaking to you.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And then you were like, oh, I'm doing a talk tomorrow. So yeah, last night was my first sort of day that I did. So I went to bed at 10. I couldn't get to sleep for a while, but I'm being patient with it. And woke up today at 6:30, and I've, like, all the time during this lockdown, I've been waking up at about 10, probably 9:30.
Yes.
So it's really early for me, and it felt great. And my cat was very appreciative. And I got up, and then I did yoga. I did like 10 rounds of sun salutes, and because I've sort of looked up what type I am, and so I sort of need to do more sort of vigorous exercise. And I did salute yoga and meditation, which I always do in the evenings, but I did it this morning as well today. And learnt a few other things, and then had a lovely sort of light breakfast, and it was still only like 8 o'clock, and and I have felt so good all day. I know it's only day one, but I've felt so good, whether it's it doesn't matter why, I suppose, but whether it's actually that or just the fact that I've committed to it feels really good. It feels very, very self-loving. Because I realised the other day that I have this resistance to exercise, and I realised it's because I was coming at it from a battle sort of place. Yeah. And I refused to, I was very resilient to it because I didn't want to, I was rebelling against all the sort of ego, consumerism, media stuff. I was like, no, I'm going to love myself as I am. But then I didn't really exercise. And now something shifted the other day. I was dancing, and I was like, oh, it's just, if I do it from this sort of place of self-love and joy and lightness. And so I do yoga in the mornings, and I dance in the evenings, and just do it light, and it doesn't need to be, it's just fun. And so I just
wonderful.
And I've looked at what I should eat and not eat, and so I've made a few little changes.
Wonderful. So, I mean, you're such a success story for Ayurveda already.
One day.
Anyway. That's what it takes, is that you have the experience that this is helping me and I feel better. And I've done routines that just made no difference, so not everything is going to be helpful. But if you find what really works for you, it makes your heart sing. And it lights up your day. And getting up early, it's like the day feels longer, doesn't it? Yeah. It feels like there's this spaciousness. Yeah. Oh, it's lovely. Lovely. Thank you. Anybody got any questions?
I just have a comment. I mean, you have, as somebody, I'm just reading the comments in the group chat. So Leslie said, I so enjoy all of that. And Christina said, thank you for this interesting fusion. And I think fusion is the word, really, because you have combined quite a few things. So, I have different thoughts related to everything you have said. But there was one thing which really resonated with me earlier when you were talking about the family and ancestors. And for me, this is why I'm a huge fan of family constellations work. Because for me, it's not just about working. I've been to many, many workshops, and it's not just about working on a specific issue that I might have, or that somebody else, being a representative. But for me, every workshop that I've been to, it's almost like peeling off layers of an onion and uncovering all these blurry images of my ancestors. So all those ancestors that I was aware of, like great grandparents and people before them, they have become almost like more materialized and like more real, rather than these like blurry photos from the beginning of the 20th century or 90. I don't know, were there photos in 19? I have some very old photos, but they all kind of materialized. And for me, over those last few years that I've been doing family constellations, those ancestors who have become more real, they've become a really great resource for me. So now I find that if ever I'm facing hardship, I mean, at the moment with this whole lockdown, I actually feel it doesn't faze me at all, because, I mean, come on, guys, this is a joke compared to our ancestors who lived through World War II. So yes, what's a big deal staying at home?
Yeah.
You know, and of course there were bombs, you know, London was bombed, in my country, you know, it was even worse. It's like, so when you know that your ancestors lived through all that and they survived and you are a product of their lives, I mean, that's so empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there are some individuals who are having a really tough time right now. You know, not me. Not, you know, hopefully.
But if you're just thinking, we're all here, result of these people's lives. We are that end result. And if anything, it's so empowering. And it's almost a responsibility, not a responsibility in a sense of a burden, that we have a burden of all these ancestors continuing their stories. No, it's responsibility in a very empowering way. So these people made it. And
yes.
We will too.
Yes, yes, we find our strength in there. Yeah. Somebody else? Yeah, thank you, Elena.
Any other questions or comments? Well, anyway, you'll be able to comment in the chat box. Normally with our real life events, this is a point where we would have a break, like a 10-minute tea break, and then continue with the second talk of the evening. So some of you are here for the first time at a Hove StressBusters event, and I think most of you were here at the beginning when I introduced and said the whole concept of the evening is to actually open ourselves to things that we might not necessarily seek out. So if you joined us tonight because you're interested in Ayurveda, I really urge you to stay on for the second part of the evening, which will be something completely different. Although one of the things you mentioned, Julie, was embodiment.
Yeah.
This is very, very relevant to what Debbie is going to be talking about shortly. There is actually, do you want to read can you see the chat window, Julie? There is a comment from Christina.
Perhaps the difference now is that then it was very straightforward, and this time it is stories, conspiracy theories, so not so straightforward, and that might raise more fear and uncertainties.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've been on a bit of a journey with conspiracy theories, because on the one hand, you can get in a kind of really paranoid kind of space with them, like everybody's out there to manipulate me, and you know, and I can't trust anything, and that doesn't feel very helpful to me personally, to be kind of energetically, you know, and it doesn't, it's not constructive. On the other hand, it's quite clear there is really dodgy stuff happening. And that's really where I found the reading about the Kali Yuga a support, you know, because it's like it's acknowledging, yes, you know, that is really not how we should be living, or rather this is really not how we should be living, and it wasn't like that before, and it won't be like that in the future, but it's like that at the moment. And is there a tipping point? Because it feels to me like there are tipping points, you know, like the energy for change is mounting. You can see things beginning to disintegrate. So I think where we are in history is at a pivotal place. And I think recognizing that is quite helpful. So I don't know if that entirely answers your question, but yeah, it's really finding, you know, what is what kind of ideas are going to help me to take constructive action, and what's going to take me down a rabbit hole of kind of fear and paranoia. I don't really want that.
Yeah, okay.